this is the first screen you will see in Darktable. And to start this off correctly, we're going to change something in the settings menu, which is up here. If you open that one up, you see general, import, light table, darkroom, processing, and much more. If you go to processing, you need to make sure that the auto apply pixel workflow defaults is set to scene referred filmic, because this is actually the preferred way from the developers to develop your image. Now let's close this one down, because I'm not going in depth in the other settings, but we're going to move on. When you open up Darktable, you see a left menu and you see a right menu. And in the left menu, you have things like add to library, copy and import, which I'll show in a minute, by the way. You see collections, you see collection filters, and you see image information. And the image information has things like aperture, exposure, focal length, ISO, and all the stuff you've used to shoot your images. And then on the right side is basically what has to do with a specific image. So the selection, you can select all or select none. Actions on selection. You've got the history stack, which I'll explain in a minute. We've got styles, the metadata editor. So if you want to change the title, description, creator, publisher, etc. Tagging, geotagging, and we've got the export one, which I'll show at the end of this video. And then up here we've got the light table, so that's your first menu. We've got the dark room, this is where the edit happens. And then we've got other, which is a map that will show you where the images were taken if you've got your location on. We've got a slideshow, which allows you to watch your images during a slideshow. And then we've got tethering, which is something professional photographers use that hook up their laptop with a screen, for instance. They snap a photo of a model and then the photo comes into Darktable straight away if they used tethering. So that requires connecting your camera to Darktable. Right, let's import some photos and move on with the tutorial. So we're going to add to library, and then we've got places where we can import our photos from, and then we've got the folders, and then we can either ignore non-raw images, recursive directory, and select only new pictures. Let's say your location is not here. You can click this plus button and that will allow you to navigate to the designated folder. So that's what I'm going to do. And then once you've found the folder, all you have to do is click open. We're going to click add to library and there you go. But look at this. These are a lot of photos that are being loaded in right now. And I want to be very efficient with my workflow. And for that, you can label or rate your images. And there's basically two ways how you can do this. The first way is up here by stars. And the second way is by giving them colors. So if I click a photo, the first one, I can give it a star. So a 1-star rating, 2-star, 3, 4, 5. And I can give it a color. Now you can do this with shortcuts as well. And whenever you're in a menu, whether it's the light table or darkroom menu, if you hold the H button, you will see all the possible shortcuts over here. So I already said we can give the thumbnail a rating from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can do that with the numeric keys, or we can use the F1 to F5 keys for giving them colors. So let's say the first one, I'm going to select that one and I wanted to give it a rating of 4. I see 4 stars popping up right here. And if I want to give it a rating of purple, I'm going to hit F5 and this little purple dot right there is being activated. Now I'm going to remove that one and I'm going to remove the stars by clicking on F5 again and on 0 on my keyboard so that everything is fresh. Because we can go to sort by and then we can go to rating, color label. So let's say I only want to see 5-star photos. So I'm going to give this a 4. And I'm going to give this one with my daughter a 5-star rating. That's the only 5-star we have. This is a 4-star. And if all goes well, if we sort it by rating, we see that 2 photos have been selected because these are the only 2 photos that have received a label. Now, if I give this a purple one and I'm going to the color label one and I'm going to select the purple one, I see that only this photo will pop up. And this is called culling your images so that it's very easy to work with them. Now let's go back to the file name, the way to sort this so we've got everything back again. And let's move on to the next part of this video, which is using the darkroom. Now the darkroom is used to edit a photo. And what's good to know is that Darktable is non-destructive. So for every image that you see right here, it's going to create an XMP file, and that basically contains all of the edits that you're doing or all the changes or modifications that you're doing to an image without the image itself being changed. Now the changes will be seen once you export them and then go to the darkroom. So I've selected a photo of my two daughters looking at these reindeers, and in the darkroom we've got a left menu again and we've got a right menu. And the left menu contains things like snapshot, history, duplicate manager, color picker, tagging, image information. Like I said before, it's showing you the full path of the folder. It's showing you the date and time, things like exposure, the mask manager, and the export button. So you can now export your photo straight away from the darkroom menu rather than going to the light table after your edits. Now about the mask manager, if you created a mask in an image, you can name that one. So it's very easy for you to find the one that you've used before. And what's important to know is because we're working with a scene referred workflow, this means that several modules will be added automatically. So the color calibration, the exposure, the filmic RGB, and the orientation, this is an auto one. So don't be fooled and go like, hey, why are these here already? Because I haven't done anything. That's because that's the way it should be. Then if we go to the right hand side menu, we see all the modules, which means that you can find the modules that you want to use here. Now, what's good to know is that we've got a quick start or quick access panel, which right now gives the color balance RGB. Then we've got the show only active modules. So that will show the active modules that we see over here as well, which allow you to change some things. Then we've got the black and white ones for the monochrome, color contrast, color correction, color balance RGB, and a color calibration. And then the other one is colors, which shows the color balance RGB. Now these three dashes over here will allow you to use presets. Right now my own preset is being selected, so the Rico Resolves one, but I can choose all the modules, which will show me all the modules, but I can go to the scene refer workflow because this is the one that we're using. This is what we set up. So that makes sure we only see the modules that can be used in the scene referred workflow. Now let's say you want to change the contrast for image because this is a very flat image. You can go to the search bar and fill in contrast, and it will show you all the modules that allow you to change the contrast. Same goes for the saturation. It will show you all the modules that will allow you to change the saturation. And remember, when you first start to edit your image in Darktable, the best way to do this is to use image correction first, so the basis, then change the color, and then change the effects. Now let's look at the filmic RGB module real quick. I'm not going in depth right now about this module, but I am going to show you what you can use this for. We've got the scene, reconstruct, look, display, and options. If we go to the look, that will allow us to change the contrast. And if I add in some contrast in this image, you see that it starts to become less flat. And I can even create a balance, which allows you to slide the latitude along the slope to give more room to shadows or highlights. Use it if you need to protect the details at one extremity of the histogram. The histogram is up here, which will allow you to use a vector scope where you can see where you push the colors towards. Then we've got the waveform, which will show us these. Then we've got the RGB parade. I've used this one in a different video. Be sure to check it out, where you can drag this to change exposure, double click to reset, or shift alt scroll to change the height of this entire part. You can use this, for instance, to change the white balance to make sure that everything is in order. Like I said, I made a different video about it. And then we've got the histogram itself back to where we were with our shadows right here, our midtones right here, and our highlights right there. Now let's say you don't want to use the same filmic RGB that has been used before. If we go back to this step, we can compress the history stack, and now our previous ones, or all the ones that we did after the orientation. So in this case it was 1, but let's say we had 3 or 4. Will be gone. We're back at this step again, and we can start from scratch. And if we go back to the Filmic RGB by searching for it in the search bar, we can go to this little button right here, a multiple instance actions, that will allow us to create a new instance or to duplicate an instance. And if we duplicate it, the same settings are being used. And if we use a new setting, this will allow us to change things over the previous one. All right, so let's move on to a module. I'm going to use the color calibration for this step. Now, what's good to know about modules or certain modules is that they have presets which can be found using the dashes right here. In this case, it's got a black and white preset. We've got the basic channel mixture. We can swap the greens and blues. So let's say we want to create a black and white image from this. I'm going to use the first one, Fuji across 100, and it automatically creates a black and white image for me, which will decrease the editing time I need for a photo. Now, all right, I've done this. I don't want to do this. I want to go back, or I want to see a before and after. If I want to see a before and after, I need to take a snapshot, which will take a snapshot of your current view. Then we can go back to the step that we started with, so the orientation one, and we can compress the history stack. And then if we select this snapshot, you see that it appears on the left side, and we see the old one on the right side. Now, this little symbol allows us to change this around. It's anywhere you want to, but in this case, I'm going to keep it as is. And if I move it to the left, you see the old image appearing. And if I move it to the right, you see the new image appearing, which is a very handy way to see the edits that you've done and the result that it generated. And then once you're done comparing the two, click it again, and then it will be deselected. And if you want to delete that one, we've got a little symbol for that right here, reset, which goes for all the modules, because all the modules have that reset button, which means that if you've done an edit and it's not to your liking, you can reset it. And that's a very handy feature. Now, one thing, let's go back to these dashes, is the presets for modules. Now, I already said I've got one here right now that I've created. And if you want to create one of your own, you can go to Manage Presets, and that will allow you to create a new preset using this button right here. And if you click it, you can give it a name. So in this case, I'm going to call it the Darktable Tutorial preset. I'm going to rename it, and then it allows me to add in different types of modules for the quick access. I can add a module group, which will allow me to create a new one. I can give it a symbol, so let's say the color one, and then I can add in modules, all the available modules. I'm going to place the color balance RGB in it, and then if I go back and I click these 3 dashes, it's appearing over here, and if I click it, and I click this color one, it shows the one that I've selected. Right, so let's go back to the workflow scene revert, because like I said, that's what we're working with. And then let's look at the other options in Darktable. On the bottom right here, you have your film strip that will show you all the images that are in the light table menu. But it's also got these little symbols right here, which can be very, very handy for you. The first one is toggle focus speaking mode. It's got a shortcut as well, which is Shift-Control-F, and that will show you everything that's in focus of this image. And the different types of colors, which I'll show up here, mean a different type of focus. Now, if we deselect it, it's gone again. And if we click the next one, which is the color assessment conditions, that will create a white border around it, which will allow you to see this image in a better perspective when color grading it after you've done the basics. Now let's click that one. Then we've got another one, the raw overexposed indication, and that will show these symbols right here. And then the next one, which is very, very handy, this is the clipping indication. Red is clipped highlights and black is clipped shadows. Now we see a little bit of black over here, which means that it basically doesn't have any detail. But if you have a camera which has a very high dynamic range, you should be able to recover some of the details. Same goes for the highlights. Then we've got the soft proofing, we've got the gamut checking, and we've got the toggle guidelines, which will allow you to see how the image looks in regards to the rules of thirds. Now the rules of thirds is that you place an image in the center, or you place it on 1/3 of the image, or at the 2/3 of an image. And let's say you have a model, you make sure that the eye is over here, for instance, when it's not centered, and if they're looking to the right. And if they look to the left, you place them over here, because you always want to make sure, depending on the creative angle, by the way, that you use the rules of third in the right way. So let's deselect it and let's start editing this fun image of my daughter. So we're going to do the basic things first. And the basic things for me is making sure that the output color profile is set to sRGB, which is web safe, because this will prevent the colors from shifting after export. I've had a lot of questions about this in the past, like, hey, how come once I've edited my photo and I export it, it looks completely different? Well, this is the reason, because you probably didn't have the color profile set to sRGB. And once we've done that, we're going to fix the crop, and we need to fix the horizon if necessary. Now you can select the freehand, original image, square. It all depends where you're going to place this. So let's say Instagram, you can use a square one, and for normal TVs and stuff, 60:9 is good. And then if I make it smaller or bigger, the same aspect ratio stays. Right now I don't have any guidelines, so I don't know where they are in the rules of thirds. I do have some idea, obviously, but you can click this or check this box, show guides, and that will show you the guides. And then if you move this, you see that the guidelines are moving with it. So let's say I'm going to place my oldest daughter on the left rules of thirds. Then this would be the crop that I'm going to use. So I'm going to close this one down, and then this is the image. And let's say the horizon isn't straight. What you can do is hold your right mouse button, click down, and then hold it and drag it to the right or the other way to the left, and then release it. And then your image will automatically start to switch, which is great when you have a beachside photo, for instance, where you see that the horizon is a little bit off. Now let me undo that by clicking Ctrl Z once, twice, and we're back at the image where we started with. And then the next thing is changing basic things like the lens correction. So let's do that first. Open that one up. It's going to use the correction method of embedded metadata. I can use other ones, but let's see how that turns out. There you go. It made a small correction and I like how that looks. And now I want to change the exposure. So I'm going to search for exposure to see what I can use for that. We've got the exposure module. We can change the exposure here, or we can click this on the right side for the highlights if it's not properly exposed. And then we can drag that to the right. And then the exposure will start to move. Now, if I go back, you see that this is before, this is after. It's a little bit lighter and it looks better. Then we're going back to the Filmic RGB one. And then the scene can be used for the white and black point. The reconstruct can be used for the highlights. We've got the look, which can be used for the contrast. We've got the display, and we've got the options like color science, contrast, and highlights. We can have them hard, soft, or safe. Same goes for the shadows. We can use custom middle gray values, although this isn't recommended in a general, so I never use this. And one more thing I want to show is if I click this one, the axis labels and value displays, you see a 0 and 100 and a minus 7.7 and a plus 4.6. And the 0 stands for the darkest part of the image and the 100 for the lightest part of the image. Now let's change some of the values. I want to change the contrast of this image, so I'm going to increase that. And I want to change the white relative exposure a little bit, but I can also use that by using the auto tune levels. If I click this color picker, it's going to select this part of the image. It's going to change them automatically, but I still see some of the highlights not being properly exposed, so I'm going to change that manually. There you go. Now let's close this down because we're done with the Filmic RGB, and we're going to move forward to the next one, which is the color calibration, which I'm using for the white balance. Now, I've talked about this histogram before. I'm going to create a new instance and I'm going to change this to the RGB parade. And we see that red is dominant and greens and blues are less. Now, if you want the perfect white balance, you need to make sure that this all lines up. But keep in mind that when you have a photo which got a lot of greens or very bright certain colors, they will always be a little bit higher. But the goal is to match this the best way possible. Now there's another reason why I'm using the color calibration one rather than the white balance one. And the reason for that is because the developers want you to use that one. And they explain it by the old white balance module would focus on the whites and grays of an image. This would neutralize all the colors and pixels in an image, while the color calibration module focuses on all the colors that are in an image. This is done with the cat menu. It looks at all the colors of an image and relights them as if they had a different light shining on them. That way, giving a more natural and, in their opinion, better outcome. So that's the reason why I'm going to use this as well and show you the result. Alright, so let's go to the greens and let's start to add some more greens into the image. And the same goes for the blues. And then once you're satisfied, you can use the colorfulness to add in more saturation in the reds, in the greens, and in the blues to make this image come to life more. And once again, let's take a snapshot. Let's go to step number 12, because this is where we were after the Filmic RGB. And let's click on this one and we can drag this out. So this is what we started with. This is what we ended with. And that already looks a lot better. Now let's add in some more. I'm going to the color balance RGB. This is the preferred module to use. We've got the master 4 ways masks. In the master, you can shift the hues from the left to the right. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you want to reset something that you've done, you can double click it and it will go back to its default value. We can add in some global vibrance, so that changes the colors as well. We can add in contrast here or take it away. The chroma grading, which can be done overall and then specifically in the shadows, midtones and highlights. Same for the saturation. We can change the saturation of the entire image. So dropping it down creates another black and white image. Or we can say we just want to drop them in the shadows, or we just drop them in the midtones, or maybe increase them in the midtones. That's what you can do over here. And then we've got the brilliance grading. So we can make it lighter or darker, or we can use it to change the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. And what's good to use in combination with this is the one I've showed you before, which is the clipping indication. So you want to drop the highlights in this case. So if we drop this down, you see those reds disappearing, which means that they are no longer clipped. And if we see that the shadows are a little bit dark, we can add them in the shadows, which will lighten the shadows and brings back more detail. But don't get discouraged if you can't properly expose your image, because there are always certain parts in your image that will be either underexposed or overexposed. Just make sure you try to get them as perfect as possible. All right, now let's say I want to target a specific area. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. Let's say you want to target a specific area. So I want to focus on my kids, for instance, and not on the rest of the image. We need a mask for that. And you have this menu down here, which are available in all the modules. The first one is the uniformly, which will allow you to change the blend modes from normal, average, etc. And here we have the drawn mask. We've got the parametric mask. Then we've got the drawn and parametric mask. And we've got a raster mask. If we use the drawn and parametric mask, we can select certain areas. So the best way to show this is we've got a circle here. We've got an ellipse here, we can draw one here, we can create a brush here, and then we've got a gradient one, which you can use for, let's say, a sky or horizon. And then we've got these show and edit mask elements. Now, just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to drag something over my oldest daughter, yeah? Now, if I'm done creating this mask, if I hit the right mouse button, the mask will automatically be created. Now you see what already happened. You saw that this became darker and she became lighter. And you can see that with this symbol right here, which displays the mask on and off. So now we see that this doesn't have a mask and this does. Now let's say you want to make it even more specific. So let's say you like how the image looks, but this pink really stands out and annoys you and draws your attention, and that's something you don't want to. Now I'm going to delete this mask by clicking my right mouse button to remove it, and now everything is being affected again. But let's make a new mask. So I'm going to click over this shirt. And the reason for that is because pink is in the skin tones as well. And this will help me showcase the next part of this video even better. So we've got a drawn mask, but we want to be more specific. So we can then use the parametric mask as well. So we've got the gray value, reds, greens, blues, and the most important one, the hue one. And we have two options. So we've got the drop tool, which allows us to drag this around, and that will show us where the pixels are. So the hair is obviously more in the yellowish tones, and then the shirt is in the pink ones. Or we can use this selection tool, and that will allow us to select an image. Now, if you want to see your mask, click this symbol again. And basically how you can approach this is that the top one is the main one, the bottom one is the feathering. You can move the right to the left, and you can use the left one to move it to the right to feather something out. Now remember, the mask is already feathered as well, so that's why you see the bleed over here. But let's say you don't want that bleed. What you can do is try and see how you can remove that by using these sliders. And if that doesn't give you any satisfactory results, you can always change the mask feathering as well. Two ways how you can do that. The first way is to just drag these things in. That's one way. Another way is holding shift and then scrolling away or towards you to make it bigger or smaller. So in this case, I want it to be much smaller. In fact, I want it to be really small. Because the flowers are pink as well, and that's why we have all that bleeding. Or we can use this feathering radius one and the blurring radius. Now if we activate the mask again, you see that it's different. So we can decrease the feathering, we can decrease the blur as well, and we can change the mask opacity to make it more harsh or make it less harsh. Same goes for the contrast. We can increase it or decrease it. If you decrease it, the edges will be much softer. In this case, I want to drop it down a bit because it's really drawing my attention toward it, and now it doesn't anymore. So that's how you can specifically address certain parts of the image. I'm going to reset this module for the sake of this tutorial. Now everything that I've done is now gone with the color balance RGB. I'm going to make it much lighter. And I think this looks fine enough for this image. I'm going to take another snapshot and I'm going to go back to the previous version. Let's have a look. So this is basically what we started with. And this is what we ended with, a very bright image. And now there's another thing I wanted to show you, because let's say you want a second version. You want to see how something else looks. Let me show you how to do that. So in this case, if I deselect the snapshot, I'm going to reset that one. Right, now it's gone. Let's go back to this one. So, okay, so this is what we ended up with, right? And now you want to try a black and white version. Okay, the best way to do that is to go to the duplicate manager and then duplicate the image. That will create a second XMP file. But in this case, if you go back to, let's say, the exposure one, and you compress the history stack, it will only compress the history stack of this version and not from your previous version, because the previous version still has everything. So let's go back to the second version, and like I said, I want to create a black and white image. We're going to the color calibration module. I'm going to the gray one. I'm just going to move these sliders around just for the sake of this tutorial. So now we've got a black and white version, we've got a color version, and now we can decide which one we like the best, or we can decide to export them one by one. And how to do that is to go to the export tab and then fill in all the details. You can give it a unique file name. You can change the format to JPEG or PNG, for instance. For JPEG, the quality on 95 is perfectly. You can set the size if you want to. You can allow upscaling, high quality resampling, anything that you need. We've got the profile. Let's set it to sRGB, and we can give it a style if we have styles, because let's say you like this style because you've got many photos shot from that day which are all kind of the same. Rather than editing them one by one, you can click this button and create a style from the current history stack. Then you can select which modules you want to keep, and then you can click save after giving it a name. And then if you have a different photo, so let's say this one, you can go to this button right here and then select the style. I don't have any styles because I didn't save it, but then you can select that style. It will be automatically applied to this image and save you heaps of time. Now, another way how you can export the image is by going to the light table menu and then go to the export menu and then have all the same options. Click export and your image will be exported. And if you want to learn about the specific modules of Darktable, be sure to subscribe. This was the masterclass for beginners. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time. Doei!